Hello and welcome to Media 7. In this week's show we'll mark two anniversaries, 40 years on air for Auckland's student radio station and a 50th birthday this month for the Consumers Institute. But first, we're looking at the battle for the future of the news business. With many newspapers in crisis and sustainable internet advertising revenue as elusive as ever, one baron is buying a fight. The shots were fired earlier this year by News Corporation CEO Rupert Murdoch, blinking like a lizard at the Sun Valley Media Moguls Conference as he explained the grand plan to address the money problem in online news.
We have a lot of plans I'm not ready to disclose yet to really lead the newspaper industry into monetising what it has.
Fast forward to just lately and Plan A turns out to be blame Google. Here's the over-caffeinated guy from Tech VI.
Now, normally, a search engine works by crawling the internet and finding sites using data provided by content providers. Content providers usually want their information to be searchable so more people can find their information. In fact, sites go through considerable lengths, like going through search engine optimization, in order to be found easily. Some sites are even willing to pay to get their content listed as a sponsored result. This potential deal between Microsoft and News Corp would be a significant move in the search engine field, since a search engine company would be paying for its results.
But will it work?
I spoke with Ken Doctor. He's an industry analyst out in San Jose with Outsell, and what he told me was his publisher's essentially trying to create a new world order, he said. He said it's a lot of bluster, a lot of throwing of hand grenades to see what happens after the smoke clears. It could be part of Murdoch's move to kind of create a Hulu-like site for print content, a subscription service where people could get this aggregator of print content, but it wouldn't be through the search engines.
Well, clearly this is a strategy that makes TV presenters talk really fast, but what does it mean for the rest of us? Not good. Back at the dawn of time, the late 90s, search engines basically sucked. Their results were determined by commercial deals not visible to you and me.
Everyone said, well, our search is at least 80% as good as the next person's. Isn't that good enough? And Larry and Sergey said, no, it turns out that last 20% really does matter. And the fact that our search is noticeably better than everyone else's will make a big difference.
Google just worked when it came along because its results were ranked according to how important we said they were by linking to them. In return, it got to employ nearly all the smart people on Earth, including internet father figure Vint Cerf. So, is it back to the future? And if Rupert gets what Rupert wants, will that even work anyway? I'm joined now by consultant and commentator Lance Wiggs, whose bulging CV includes a stint as head of Group Digital at Fairfax Media New Zealand, and the publisher of the Evolving Newsroom blog, founder of the online media marketplace allaboutthestory.com, and editor-in-residence at Wintec School of Media Arts in Hamilton, Julie Starr. Welcome to you both.
Thanks. Thank you.
Well, for the benefit of the viewers at home, Lance, what are the implications of, if it comes to this, Murdoch's results going off Google? What happens?
I think the story was correct. We'll stay on Google. We'll stay to the people that provide us news where we don't have to pay for it, and we will just ignore Bing like we have already.
Yeah, Bing being Microsoft's search offering that just can't get traction, can it?
Well, it's getting a bit of traction, and it's got a good percentage, I think, in the States, but it is a number 2 player, and I think it always will be. The other thing is it'll create opportunity for other content providers that are providing the content for free and are providing quality content, and there's plenty of those, and we'll just go to those sources. And those guys will increase their page views, they'll increase the money they're making out of advertising, and Murdoch will be the worst for wear. So
you don't see much prospect of Microsoft spending the money to be the only search engine that has Murdoch search results? That's not going to be a big bonus for them?
Murdoch's a really smart guy, and he's playing a game here. I don't know what the end game is for Murdoch, and he may not know what it is, but he's blustering, he's charging ahead. He's going to extract some money from someone, and I don't think he's going to do it in such a way where we won't be able to see the majority of his content for free.
Julie, I saw you nodding when
Furiously, yes.
the bit about lobbing grenades and seeing what happens afterwards.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a case of that he doesn't like what he sees at the moment, he doesn't know where he's going to end up, but he wants to change it?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of hand waving this year generally. I mean, a few months back he said, I'm going to charge for all of my content at the end of the year, and then it was like, oh, well, maybe next year we're just going to push it back a bit. And a couple of others have said the same thing, and they keep pushing it back. And it feels to me like he's trying to say, I want to lead this new world order. That was a really good way of putting it. I'll be the figurehead if you'll all come in behind. Because obviously if they do it on their own and everyone else continues to give away their content, they're sunk. I mean, why would I go there? Today I was reading about this very subject, and the first 2 links I clicked on were pay links. I went to a paywall, and so what did I do? I didn't say, yes, I'll join up and pay to read this site. I went somewhere else. And I'll always do that if I have the option.
And yet, I get the impression from journalists, particularly in Britain, it seems. I was talking to Toby Manhire, who's working at The Guardian. He said that a lot of the people working around him quite like the idea of what Murdoch's doing because they can't see any other future for newspapers.
Sure, and I think there's a little, I don't want to say desperation, it's not quite the right word, but we are looking for answers. This is not an easy problem to solve. If it were, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be a rich person on a yacht in the Adriatic. It's a big deal, and people's jobs are on the line, and it's an emotional time. It's very... emotions are running quite high in journalism, I think. Like, well, if we can't, if newspapers keep sort of declining and eventually they disappear or just become uneconomic to continue printing 5 days a week, and we're not getting enough money from online, what happens to my job? What happens to me? So I can understand why people would want to get behind it, but I'm not convinced, A, that it's going to happen, or B, that it's the best way forward. But let's also bear in mind that there's paywalls and there's paywalls. They're not inherently evil or bad. I think if you put your crossword archive behind a paywall and say, like the Times in the UK charges $4.95 a month for a month's access or $12.95 for a year, that's great. That makes a lot of sense, and you package it up. If you try and put Britney Spears stories behind a paywall, however, you're going to fail. So I don't think anyone is talking about wholesale carving it off. I think everyone's looking at hybrid.
Well, Lance, we had earlier on this year had Barry Coleman, the publisher of National Business Review, on the show saying he was going to start charging for content, not all of it, but a fair chunk of it. We doubted him, but you've been in touch with him lately, haven't you?
I have been in touch with him. I also blogged about what I saw from the traffic stats from Nielsen Net Ratings. I saw from the outside a drop in traffic, depending on which stat, between 25 and 38%. And the scariest one to me was the total time spent engaging with the site, which has dropped. That was the 38% figure. But Barry tells me through an email that the number of subscribers they have, or the number of people that have the right to access the site, is 21,000. That's based on the number of people inside big corporates mainly, as I understand. They estimate that about 7,500 is their real subscriber number. They wouldn't give me how much money, obviously, that they're making out of that, but they seemed happy with progress to date.
So we're not looking at a complete flop, say like the Herald's attempt at premium content was, which just didn't seem to work for them at all, did it?
And it wouldn't have. And they're in very different markets. And I think if the Herald and stuff try to charge for their content now, that they will fail because others will come into their place. NBR, and they're similar to the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal and NBR have this situation where they're able to create original content that people have to read. And if you don't read it, you're not up with the times in your game. And NBR, to give them full credit, they've been hiring extra people for their online site. They're producing some quality content. I wish I could read it. And Chris Keel, who's the guy I talked to today in particular, I think is writing some excellent work on technology. So it's pretty hard to compete with them if you're Stuff and NZ Herald. And so in a way, they beat them with volume. But they don't beat them with quality at the moment.
Is that a problem? Because the fact that you're not reading those stories means you're not blogging about them, no one else is, no one's talking about them. Is that a problem? I
do think that's an issue. I mean, I think you can have a business behind a paywall. You just have to decide how much money you need to generate. You know what I mean? Like, it's a choice. I can choose to have a garden so long as I can make that pay, and it's a different model from choosing to be out there in the open. Personally, I prefer the open. I think it's a more exciting environment to work in. But yes, I don't link to sites that have paywalls because that would infuriate my readers. And if I had a news site, I wouldn't link to people who had content behind paywalls. because that would just infuriate my readers. So you are, over time, I think, in danger of becoming irrelevant. Your voice can get lost.
You drop out of the conversation.
That's right. And someone like me, and maybe I'm not entirely typical, but I don't go to news sites. I find my news via Twitter, by personal recommendation. If someone like Lance or yourself says, read this, it's interesting, I'll often trust you and go and have a look at it. You know, even Facebook, I think I read, not that long, a couple of months ago, the Telegraph in London was getting something like 8% of its traffic from social media. Now, all of that stuff you're potentially cutting yourself off from. And the future of news is social, I read the other day. So, you know, we do want to talk about it. As you know from running a blog, we want to talk, we want to be involved in the conversation. And so if you're, I see things that Chris Keel links to on Twitter, but he now very kindly says this is subscriber content, so he doesn't waste my time. So I won't read it.
I actually thought, I was quite amused by Ariana Huffington this week, pointing out that Rupert Murdoch and several other publishers seem to regard Google News and anyone else who aggregates news as stealing their content.
As parasites. But she also pointed out, didn't she, a number of his sites where
Murdoch owns a string of websites
content
that do exactly that, including Rotten Tomatoes, which is nothing but the first paragraph of everyone else's film review. Yeah. So doesn't that say something that this is in the DNA of the internet? This is how the internet works. We point each other to things?
I absolutely agree. And there's a broad spectrum of content here, right from the Rotten Tomatoes all the way through to the high quality, behind the paywall stuff. I want to add to your point, Julie. It must be really frustrating to be a writer behind a paywall. So you spend all this time writing this great stuff and then nobody reads it. Nobody talks about it. There's no conversation, there's no comments and that sort of stuff. And I know the AFR had a real issue with this with some of their writers, and as a result some of them jumped ship and went across to start their own sites. And so ultimately you're going to see that sort of thing happen as well, which leads, I guess, to the next thing. Legacy old media finds it very difficult to publish in an efficient, cost-efficient manner online. And it's just very hard. They've got these processes and procedures which take a long time and are quite expensive. Then you look at something like interest.co.nz, and you have 5 guys in a room, which is a very small room, and very low overheads. They're doing videos in front of a screen where he's sitting down in front of a computer like this, and they're able to make money as a result.
But still, Bernard Hickey at Interest.co, you know, much as I admire him, he can't run the fleet of reporters that you would hope a major newspaper would, can he? There are costs in proper news gathering. But I'm interested that Murdoch constantly talks about consumers wanting things for free. You know, I wonder whether the problem is not that consumers want their news for free, because we've always had it effectively for free, but that advertisers are, for whatever reason, unable to provide a revenue stream online.
Well, they haven't
What's
got
wrong
it.
there?
They haven't got it yet. So we're spending our time online these days. We're not reading newspapers as much as we used to. We're spending our time online. We're not watching TV as much as we used to. We're not really listening to the radio. But the advertising revenue is catching up with that, but it's still well behind. So I think the last figures I saw in March, and online was still a quarter of newspaper. And yet I ask anyone watching this program, have you spent 4 times as much time reading the newspaper as you spent online? And I'm guessing the answer is for pretty much everyone is no.
Absolutely not, no.
So why don't we see the ad spend following those numbers?
And there's a question about the way they're being used, you know. So how beneficial is it to keep slamming stuff in my face? Because what do? I use ad blocker on my browser and I just stop looking at it.
It's a form of self-defence, I think, to use those ad blockers. That worries me as a publisher, is that the more that the agencies give me ads that tie up people's computers, the more likely it is that they're going to find ways to block that and not see the ads at all.
Yeah, and eventually someone will just ship a browser where it's automatic, right? Surely.
Now, there are other kinds of digital content emerging that are not the internet, and Lance, you have a Kindle there.
I do indeed.
Let's have a look at the Kindle, because I think most people in New Zealand haven't seen one. It's got a picture of Virginia Woolf on it.
So this is a Kindle DX, which is the bigger version of the Kindle, and I got it in the States. It's quite hard and convoluted to get one because you have to have a US credit card and so on and so forth. And in the USA, you can download content onto the Kindle itself automatically over cell phone, over mobile telephone.
They've got their own network, haven't they?
They're a CDMA network they've tied up with one of the providers. And the new one is coming out, which is over GSM, which will work in most countries, but not this one. And hopefully it'll work in this one soon. And so you can get The Economist when it's released in the US, in England.
Which is fabulous. That's really attractive. The one thing you can't do, of course, is refer that link on to someone else or share it with someone. It's a different environment, but maybe one where publishers stand to make some more money?
The pricing on this is the thing that's broken at the moment. So I pay to subscribe to the print Economist. For that I get the online one for free, but they want to charge me, I think it was $10 US a month extra to subscribe to this. And then, as I understand it, Amazon has a 70-30 mechanism where they take 70% of the price and give the provider 30%, which is the reverse of Apple's philosophy, where they'll pay their application developer 70%.
While we're mentioning Apple, Apple has a Kindle competitor, or what everyone thinks will be one coming out next year, the iTablet. Do you think that will be a game changer? Because I know they've been going to see media companies. They saw media companies in Australia. If
they do an Apple, it'll be the iPod coming in against the Diamond Rio again. It will be a game changer. It'll fly and die though on what sort of deals they're cutting with the media companies and what sort of deals they're cutting with the book suppliers. So if Amazon stays with their model and Apple comes in with a reverse model, you could actually see some fun here. But it comes back to the pricing. Does it create value for me? Why does The Economist not include a Kindle subscription with my print subscription and my online subscription? And that I think is the battle that is yet to be figured out. Yeah.
Julie, last word to you. Rupert Murdoch notoriously is not shy about buying a fight, and he will fight to the death. What happens if it doesn't work for him? Do you think he will stake everything here? What happens if it doesn't work for Murdoch?
Gosh, that's a good question. Well, I'm not sure that he's going to do it, actually, to be perfectly honest. I don't think he'd chuck it all away. He's not crazy. If it doesn't work, I think it's really easy these days to walk away and turn around and go, you know what, we made a mistake, let's move on. That's part of the internet as well. We're learning how to fail small, fail often, you know, what is it? Iterate often, really, you know, it's all about learning, and it's a great time for experimentation. And in fact, that's something that we're doing at the moment with a project here in New Zealand. It's called allaboutthestory.com, which is an online marketplace for buying and selling news stories. And it's just part of... Which is
good for freelancers, I must say.
Well, I hope so, and I hope it will be, and I hope over time it'll be good for editors too, who are looking for a broader range of content and something that can grab and fill a gap on their page, or just, you know, looking for new talent, and even new storytelling and ideas.
Maybe you'll attract Rupert Murdoch's attention one day.
Maybe.
Lance Wiggs and Julie Starr, thank you very much. That concludes this discussion. After the break, things get louder.